Welcome to episode 52 of Fascinating, a Star Trek podcast, the Amiga Glory.
In this week's episode, Kirk must take on another starship captain who has violated the Prime Directive and taken sides in a conflict between two tribes that resemble groups from Earth's own history. With a potentially fatal illness affecting the senior staff, can Kirk solve a planetary dispute and survive? Or will his future be as a permanent resident of the alien world?
I've found that evil usually triumphs, unless good is very, very careful.
Good evening, Ian. How are you?
I'm tired and hungry. How are you?
Evil.
You feeling evil?
Yes.
I think you should triumph unless I'm very careful.
It's always best to be careful.
I think he's talking about Kirk there.
Yeah.
A few problematic elements in this week's episode.
A lot of problematic elements.
It might well be the worst finale or conclusion of any episode so far.
Certainly one that was a little bit saccharine, or maybe not even saccharine, a little bit nauseous.
Yeah. There's a lack of subtlety, which I thought was one of, if not the biggest problem.
And quite a few leaps. One very big leap.
Yeah, there's one prolonged, long, big leap that covers a lot of things.
Yeah.
Should we get into it?
Let's crack on.
You'll have been pleased to note that we start on the bridge of the Enterprise.
We do.
Approaching Omega 4, and Sulu reports there's another ship already in orbit.
So Kirk calls an alert and a sensor scan. Sulu tells him that it is the USS Exeter.
It is, and Kirk asks Uhura to contact them, but there's no response.
Yeah, I think he recognises it as a ship that's been patrolling there for 6 months.
Well, it was here 6 months ago, and he hadn't heard of any problems.
Uhura gets no response to her request, and then Sulu informs him that there appears to be no damage to the ship.
Yes, and we see on the screen that the Exeter is a Constitution-class starship, the same as the Enterprise.
Is this when Kirk magnifies it by 3?
Yeah.
So he can see.
Yeah, it was quite small.
Yeah, takes out his little glass.
Put on the big glasses. Kirk's going to take Spock, McCoy, and Lieutenant Galloway, who he calls Lieutenant Galway, down to across to the other ship.
In the transporter room, they set their phasers to heavy stun. Have we heard of this before, heavy stun?
Possibly. They just make these up though.
They do.
Set it to moderate stun and light kill.
A wee bit of stun. And they beam over.
Set it to annoying tickle.
Over in engineering on the Exeter.
It's dark and spooky. Yeah,
they arrive and find it empty of people anyway. But what do they discover?
Uniforms with crystals around them.
Yeah, salt-like crystals. That's all that's remaining. We then have the credits before we return to engineering, where McCoy performs a tricorder scan.
Yeah, Kirk puts out a message on comms, and by now obviously Spock and Galloway have moved to some other part of the ship because it's Spock who responds. Yeah,
we should also note that McCoy shakes his head, signifying that it's not good news when he does his tricorder.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably have guessed what he's going to find.
Down on the lower level, Spock, as you say, communicates back through, confirming the lack of people with only uniforms remaining, and Galloway joins a call to let him know that all 4 shuttlecraft are still present.
That's more shuttles than the Enterprise has.
The Exeter must be a bigger ship.
It's exactly the same.
It's fitted more in.
Yeah, maybe. Kirk says to meet he and McCoy up on the bridge because that's where they're headed next, and we get a captain's log.
But with no stardate, that's unusual.
And annoying.
It's a totally pointless one. He just asks what's happened to the crew.
Well, no, he also tells you who the captain is and that he's one of the most experienced in Starfleet, Ron Tracy.
Is that the first we've heard of Ron Tracy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, he might have said that's Ron Tracy's ship earlier on, but we didn't mention it.
Back in the bridge, they meet up with Galloway pointing out that the helm was left in auto, and Spock finds the whole thing fascinating. Kirk then asks him to play the last log tape as McCoy calls him over to let him know that he has discovered what happened to the crew.
Jim, the analysis of this so far is potassium 35%, carbon 18%, phosphorus 1.0, calcium 1.5. Jim, the crew didn't leave. They're still here.
What do you mean?
These white crystals, that's what's left of the human body when you take the water away, which makes up 96% of our bodies. Without water, we're all just 3 or 4 pounds of chemicals. Something crystallized them down to this.
I have their surgeon's log, Captain. Their last log entry, Captain. On screen.
If you've come aboard this ship, you're dead, man. Don't go back to your own ship. You have one chance. Get down there. Get down there fast. Captain Tracy is...
Prepare to beam down to the planet's surface, fast.
That's the at least the second time I can think of when they've used that the sort of essence of beings.
Well, it was last week when they got condensed down to little sphere or cube things.
It was, and then a few weeks ago we had the essence in the globes, if you remember.
Yeah, and then if you remember back, kind of in an opposite way to the very first episode, they had the salt removed from the people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also had the cloud that removed elements from people in Obsession as well.
It'd be funny, wouldn't it, if they just poured some water on these uniforms and salt and
reanimated them.
Yeah.
McCoy's percentages are a bit out. He says we're 90% water. We're only about 76% water, unless something's changed between now and a couple hundred years from now. Everyone just takes water on. They've all got puffy ankles. Their socks leave lines.
Wet patches everywhere.
Yeah.
Down on Omega 4, they materialise into a setting that looks like a... See, at first I thought it was like a small Mexican town in the 1890s.
Well, I thought it was something of a Western.
Yeah, that sort of feel, yeah. And find a Caucasian man and woman about to be killed by a group of Chinese-looking people.
Yeah, casual beheading. They're just going to do it in the main square. There's no process apparently in place.
They approach the people and are about to be attacked by Liang, who is told to stop what he's doing by the aforementioned Captain Ron Tracy in his Starfleet uniform.
Yeah, we should say yes. So the people who are about to commit this execution or carry out this execution see Kirk and Spock and McCoy and Galloway and stop it and approach them instead. And as you say, Tracy appears and he's sorry to see Kirk. I think possibly because that means he's infected.
I think so, yeah.
So he tells a man named Wu to lock up the savages, I think meaning the two that were going to get executed.
Yep.
And is told by Wu that this Enterprise mob have got fireboxes, which we think are phasers.
That would make sense, yes. Wu, well, I think Wu protests that they have fireboxes.
Yes, he's quite animated about it.
But Tracy is firm and orders him to do so anyway. He then explains to the crew that the prisoners are known as Yangs and are savages who it is impossible to communicate with. Now, this thing annoyed me all the way through, well, until we find out. So the people who are Chinese are not called Yangs. Now, Yang is obviously a Chinese name. You'd think that they would be the Chinese people. So, yeah, Yang is a more Chinese name than and Liang as well was a Chinese name, who you mentioned earlier.
Yes, like the snooker player.
Liang Wenbo, yeah. So, I was annoyed. I was confused by the whole, that they're not the Chinese people.
The Chinese Luca Bracel.
We're not going to snooker. Luca Bracel. Oh, he is hopeless.
So is Liang.
Yeah, but Bracel is still meant to be this young kid who's going to come through, and he's about 29, and he's not.
So is Liang.
But neither of them are okay. Neither of them are going to do anything. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
The World
He's
Championship
like the Chinese Luca Bracel.
Yeah, he's less promoted than Bracel. I think coming from these shores is more given more airtime and more chat.
Okay.
I'm really looking forward to the snooker this year.
We'll get up to that in a future episode.
When this one goes out, will we be in the middle of the snooker when this one goes out?
More or less.
Yeah.
People will be excited with some topical chat.
Favourite time of the year? 17 days?
On the bays.
Exactly. I'm sure the American listeners love this.
And they're like, what's this snooker?
Yeah.
Is that like adult pool?
Hard pool.
Yeah. Anyhow,
yes.
You're upset about these Yangs.
Well, the naming
people.
conventions are, it's annoying. You could have called him something else. And then the reason behind the naming convention is even more infuriating.
Yes, we'll get to that. So Spock notes to Kirk that it's interesting that these natives know all about phasers, and Kirk, taking that point on board, asks Tracy what's going on.
Yeah, I think he says there's hordes of them who attack anything, and Spock accusatorily notes that it is interesting that the villagers know about phasers.
Yes, Kirk takes that point on board and asks Tracy what's going on.
And what does he say?
He says that the Exeter's Medi-scanners, which I think are just scanners, noted that the planet was safe, or told them at least, they gave the impression that it was safe, and they befriended these comms, who are the sort of Asian or Chinese-looking people.
Yes.
It seems to be very sort of... There's not a lot of diversity between the groups. So each group is one set of people, apparently. The locals, therefore, were shocked to see these people with lighter coloured skin, like their enemy Yangs, show up, but became friendly. I think that's Tracy's point of view. I imagine he used his phaser to convince them to
be friendly,
be on his side, yes.
Yeah.
The landing party then beamed back up while Tracy stayed behind to arrange a planet survey, or so he says, and the next thing he knew, his whole crew was dead.
Pretty much so, yeah. Don't trust Tracy at all. And also, in some of the subtitles and in IMDb, they spell comms differently. Sometimes it's spelled cons with an N, other times it's M. Even on the IMDb page for it, obviously it's comms because we come to realise what it's meant to stand for, but yeah, there's confusion.
I think at some point some people pronounce it combs as well. Yeah, Kirk says that he knows that they're all dead, he's been there. So Tracy assumes that all of them, himself, Kirk and the others, are infected, but in some way protected by being on the planet. Yeah,
it's a bit of a bombshell, isn't it, that he's dropped. You can't leave now. You're all dead if you leave.
Yeah, it's one of these sort of hyperbolic statements that I think I talked about last week.
It's certainly bollock.
McCoy notes it was fortuitous that they watched that log entry and didn't go back to the Enterprise. And Tracy then, rather than let the thought sort of linger, says the implied end to it that they'd all be dead and none of them could ever leave, like you say.
We next have a supplemental log.
Still no date.
Nope. As well as the obvious problem they face, he is also has to contend with his belief that Tracy has been interfering with the evolution of life on Omega-4. That's the least of his worries just now.
This is the most hypocritical captain's log I've ever seen. A star captain's most solemn oath is that he will give his life and that of his crew rather than violate the Prime. He's violated the Prime Directive many times.
Left, right and centre. I've made that point myself. He's making this up as he goes along. Deciding,
just want to be sanctimonious on this occasion.
We're now in a communications room, I think.
I've got it as a storeroom, but yeah, whatever you want to call it.
McCoy speaks with Uhura to give her an update on the readings and their issue that they have, and also to ask for a blood analyzer unit to be sent down.
Yeah, I think a second one, so he must only have one at the moment.
Why is that not enough?
Maybe he's got more samples than he can work at one time.
After speaking to her, he confirms to Kirk that they are definitely showing a massive infection, but are indeed being immunised by something. It's quite he got there very quickly.
Yeah, and then Kirk says something bizarre. I don't think we're going to have time to isolate it, Bones.
Yeah, this...
Okay. He's not even looked at it.
He's not looked at it. He's not a medical person.
Nope.
And we have been in numerous situations where there's a tight deadline, they've got to do something. He doesn't, even though it looks against the odds, they go to the last second. He doesn't just give up and go, yeah, this isn't happening, is it?
There's no deadline here as far as he's aware.
Yeah.
They could take years to work on it.
Certainly give him a few days.
Yeah.
Don't bother starting that, we won't have time. But Kirk, Captain...
There's going to be a major event in about 3 hours. And this episode ends in 45 minutes.
Anyway, McCoy agrees that it could take years. Again, don't know why he thinks that. And, I mean, if you go back to, was it
Murray?
Mm-hmm.
They worked on it and they solved it.
Yeah, overnight. All hands on deck. Let's do an all-nighter.
They're even faster than Pfizer.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. I thought that was a strange, an uncharacteristic...
It's just setting artificial limits on the episode. It's basically the writer setting out, here's the circumstances, they can't do anything with this, they don't have time.
Yeah.
But there's no explanation for it.
Anyway, as I was saying, McCoy agrees that it could take years and that the infection is similar to one developed on Earth during a period of bacterial warfare experiments from the 1990s. Yeah, must have missed that one.
He laments the foolishness of humans of the 90s. at this stage.
Well, if you look at some of the clothes and the haircuts, I can understand why.
That's true. But this is a lead that he has. He's got a basis to start working. So, again, why are they ruling out the possibility of resolving the matter?
Because they've read the script. They need to do something else.
They've seen what happens ahead.
At this point, Spock bursts in with a severely injured red shirt. Was that Galloway?
That was Galloway, yeah.
Who took a lance after they were ambushed by the so-called savages.
Yeah, Spock is only bruised himself and reports they were just 100 metres outside the village when they were attacked and managed to get away without having to fire their phasers.
An agitated Kirk asks Spock if there is any hope of a truce, but the red shirt answers and claims no, they are too wild. Shut it, you. You know nothing, you've just took a lance.
This is like the guy last week, I will take them down no matter what. And Kirk's like, get in line.
Yeah. Him telling that there's no chance for a truce. Be quiet. How do you do?
You're not even qualified, you're a security guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, Spock says that he's partially right and there's 2 points to consider. Number one, they are contemptuous of death and incredibly vicious. That seems like 2 points to me, but Spock says it's one. And B, they are massing for an attack because there's thousands of them, or signs of thousands of them in the foothills.
He then produces a phaser power bank which was found beside a group of dead Yangs and indicates that it was used to fight off an attack. But McCoy defends Tracy and claims that it was an entirely reasonable action based on the circumstances that he found himself in. And I would have to agree.
Well, if it's true, that's the circumstances.
Yeah.
He was getting attacked and defended himself. But Spock says, despite the fact it's harsh, Kirk has no choice but to arrest Tracy the next time he sees him.
And Kirk himself, he seems in a bit of a dilemma about what to do. Arrest him or accept the actions that he took. And Spock says that he should at least take his phaser from him.
Yeah, McCoy says that arresting him would destroy what is left of him. That's a bit of a supposition. Anyway.
He goes on to communicate with the Enterprise to let Starfleet know what has happened. But things take a turn when Tracy enters with his phaser raised and with a crew of comms as backup.
Yeah, he immediately kills Galloway for no reason and gets the villagers to take everybody else's phasers and communicators, telling Kirk that he will be the one to send the next message.
I'm quite happy that Galloway got it.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in about 8 episodes by now. He doesn't need to be. I think he actually shows up again later.
Does it? As Galloway?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it was just in severe stun and in...
Yeah. He was vaporised.
Yeah, but... Okay.
Anyhow, Tracy now contacts the Enterprise and tells them that Kirk and the others have been found unconscious and appear to be suffering from the infection more, perhaps because they were too slow to reach the planet.
And he's doing what he can to help. Sulu, who we find is in temporary command, tells Tracy that the whole medical staff will be happy to beam down to assist, but Tracy says, no, there's no need, you're alright.
Sulu's utterly incompetent in this episode. Every time we see him, he's no idea what's going on.
I would never put him in... He's not captain material, even temporary.
Yeah.
I'll give it to Ahura, I think she's...
Scotty should be in charge. Where's he?
Yeah, he's down. He got a hangover.
Lieutenant Commander not appearing in this episode.
He's got a bottle of green on the go.
Yeah, so why would you send down medical staff to a planet where they're going to get a deadly infection?
No, does he know this at that point? There's a deadly infection.
They've been in touch with the Enterprise, because remember McCoy was talking to Ahura. They were getting kit sent down to do analysis.
Yeah.
So they must know what's going on.
Yeah, Sulu, you mug.
And he just looks dazed every time they speak to him.
Yeah, he's not. See, to be honest, I'm not overly... I think he's a well-loved character, but I'm not... He irritates me. Sulu, he's not... I don't know.
He's yet to do anything genuinely interesting. Apart from that time he was growing plants that were like perving on people.
And he was jumping about with his top off, sword fighting.
Yes. That was a long time ago, though.
It was a long time ago, yeah. Yeah, I'm not overly enamoured with him. Or Scotty, for that matter.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So Kirk shouts out at this point to Sulu before being knocked out by Wu, and Sulu doesn't get it. He doesn't understand what's just happened.
Oh, he's stupid.
And is easily coddled, I would say, by Tracy.
Or conned, yeah.
Mollified.
He tells the confused Sulu that it was merely the fever talking, and the dopey captain accepts this.
Yeah, he says, let me know when he gets back up. It's like, he's just shouted at you. There's no reason to think he's not awake.
He's like, Sulu, help me. Yeah, that was, again, the fever. All right, no problem, Tracy. Just anything I can do.
Yeah, Tracy says he'll be in touch if there's any future needs, and some time then passes.
We find ourselves in a room. Kirk is alone on the floor with his hands tied behind his back, but still has to attempt to overpower one of the guards.
Yes, but Tracy comes in, sends the guard away, and talks to Kirk, who gives him this arresting spiel. Yeah,
however, he is more keen to discuss the why of the situation.
No native to this planet has ever had any trace of any kind of disease. How long would a man live if all disease were erased, Jim?
Whoa.
Tell Captain Kirk your age.
Age? I've seen 42 years of the Redbird. My eldest brother
Their
was...
year of the Redbird comes once every 11 years, which he's seen 42 times. Multiply it. Wu is 462 years old. His father is well over 1,000. Interested, Jim?
McCoy could verify all that.
He will if you order it. We must have a doctor researching this. Are you grasping all it means? This immunizing agent here, once we've found it, is a fountain of youth, virtual immortality, or as much as any man will ever want.
For sale by...
Out. By those who own the serum. McCoy will eventually isolate it. Meanwhile, you inform your ship your situation's impossible. Order them away. When we're ready, we'll bargain for a whole fleet of ships to pick us up. And they'll do it.
Yes, I suppose they would.
But we've got to stay alive. Let the Yangs kill us and destroy what we have to offer. And we'll have committed a crime against all humanity. I'd say that's slightly more important than the Prime Directive. Wouldn't you, Jim?
It's a very interesting proposition. Let me think it over.
I suppose that all we can say in Tracy's defence is that maybe he's went mad, because his logic, his plan is atrocious.
It's terrible.
What does he think is going to happen? Even the whole immunisation malarkey, the thinking behind that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, he's one guy. If the Federation want his super serum, they'll just come and take it.
Yeah, because he's basically trying to say, oh, we'll hold him, we'll hold it ransom, or we'll hold him hostage to it. So, well,
they don't have it now. Why would they?
Yeah, and the thinking behind this, that the whole living to I thought, that's not how it works. Just because you've got some sort of immunity to some diseases, you don't live forever. Your organs, your brain deteriorates, your bones, your skin. Just because you don't get a specific third-party disease,
Yeah,
you won't live forever.
I would have thought so.
I mean, because it'd be very easy. You could put someone in a bubble, effectively, on Earth.
They'd suffocate.
Yeah, and they wouldn't live for 1,000 years because everything else rots and falls away. I mean, heart disease is a disease, but it's not something you can immunise against. You know, if your diet's quite poor or you don't eat the right things, you'd have to have everything else perfect. And even then, let's say the human body isn't made to live that long. Well, I mean, that's what happens to a lot of elderly people. Maybe they get cancer or whatever, and then they survive that. They get some sort of treatment for that, and they're lying in their bed. Their eyesight goes. They get dementia. It's not a specific thing that necessarily kills them. A disease. They just die of their body's gubbed.
Being old.
Being old, yeah. I mean, if you run about there like a Yang fighting and all that sort of stuff, you've got broken bones. You're not healing back up because you're immune to a certain disease. They'll be fragile. They'll get brittle. Idiots.
During this spiel from Tracy, Kirk's been working on the bond, tying his hands behind his back, and is able to release himself at the end of the speech.
He does indeed. But for once, he is on the losing end of a fist fight, and against an old man.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
It is.
Gets his backside handed to him. Tracy subdues him and calls for the guards, and they head to prison.
He is brought into the jail, where we see McCoy and Spock are also being held, along with the two Yangs from earlier. Those were the ones who were about to be beheaded.
They are. Tracy then has McCoy sent back to the other room to work on the bloods, and tells Wu to prepare his men to ambush the Yangs.
Yeah, this time they will have many fireboxes. Tracy then invites Kirk to share his thoughts on the Yangs, as one of them makes a grab for him through the bars.
Tracy refers to them as animals who just happen to look a bit like us. And he asks Kirk how keen he is right now on the Prime Directive.
But Kirk stands firm in his belief, and so Tracy has him put into the cell with the Yangs to teach him a lesson. This reminded me of, and it won't mean anything to you, I know that already, to the movie Stir Crazy with Grossberger.
Okay.
The warden tries to put in Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. He puts them into a cell with a massive, big, fat, white baldy guy that's meant to be like a mass
serial killer. One of them's deaf and one of them's blind.
No. That's another good movie, mind you.
Okay. We then get a fight between Kirk and this Yang and the female Yang as well. They take turns to beat up on him.
Yeah, Stir Crazy is actually in my top 10 movies of all time.
Okay.
But have you not seen it?
No.
It's really good.
During this fight, we get a cutaway to McCoy working, and he sees that his guard has fallen asleep.
Well, he thinks he's fallen asleep, doesn't he?
Yeah. How much time has passed in this fight? McCoy just left at the start of it.
Yeah.
Anyhow, he reaches out for a weapon on the table, a knife of some kind, and is halted because the guy wasn't really asleep, or at least not sufficiently asleep not to notice. Back in the cell, Kirk keeps getting beaten up by these two, and Spock notes that even if they ever needed rest, they could just swap out so that one of them continues to beat on Kirk.
Yeah, but I should say, before we went to McCoy, we saw Kirk being choked out.
Okay, so I suppose you can imagine some time passed or something like that.
Perhaps, but if he was choked out, how the next time we see him, he's back on his feet fighting again?
Yeah, he's recovered.
Why would they're savages? Why would they let him recover? Why would they not kill him?
They're probably not actually savages. It's a bit of a clue.
But you still wouldn't let him get back up and fight again. You would.
Maybe they were enjoying the fight. They're not fighting for something.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, yeah, so we're back in the cell. He's managed to break free again. He's fighting off both of them, and notice to Spock that they never seem to rest.
Yeah, like I say, Spock says that even if they had to, they could just take turns.
However, he does manage to throw the Yang on his back, and Spock is able to pinch the female, which seems to give Kirk victory.
Yes, because the man goes to protect the unconscious female rather than continue to fight Kirk. And Kirk remarks to Spock it's a shame that he's not able to teach him how to do that.
I think the Spock not say he's tried several times.
Yeah.
And we see that, the man go over in a very sort of it's almost like an animal protecting their young.
Sure. Or their partner. We get another cutaway to McCoy. He's brought some food and he says thanks. Don't know why we saw that, but it breaks up a wee bit. Spock is then talking to Kirk through the bars of the cells.
He's trying to loosen one of the bars.
Yeah, he tells Kirk he's managed to loosen one, but Kirk says he can't do that because if he even tried, he'd get attacked from behind. And
he's struggling to stay awake. Don't know why.
Well, I think he assumes he'll be beaten up if he falls asleep.
Yeah, but why is he so tired?
He's been fighting for about 4 hours at this point, going by the fact that McCoy's now at dinner time.
Yeah, okay, possibly. Spock reminds him that Tracy said that there used to be a substantial civilization on the planet and suggests that the current state must be due to a war.
This is ridiculous. First of all, why are you trusting anything Tracy says? Second of all, even if Tracy believes it, what's his source? Someone's told him? There doesn't seem to be any books or recording of the history. And then, even if what Tracy says is true, you can't just assume that there was some kind of nuclear or biological war that produced mass devastation. You've only seen one town.
Yeah. And
Spock got 100 metres out the town at one point. And he saw some foothills, and that's him making an assessment of the entire planet.
Yeah, well, it's not unusual for them to do that, is it? To make an assumption based on a very small sample size.
That's true. What is unusual is for them to get quite as racist as Kirk now does.
What does he do?
Talking about yellow people and white people. Kirk keeps talking, and when he mentions the word freedom, it is repeated by the Yang.
Yeah, this startles Kirk, I think. And the Yang raises himself and says that it is a Combe worship word and he should not speak it. But Kirk says it's also their worship word.
I don't think it's I think it's a Yang worship word. It's his own worship word.
Yeah, so I'm getting confused by who's who these days. I don't know what's a Yang and what's a Kong.
They're all undercover.
Yeah.
The man says that because Kirk lives with and speaks to the comms, he's not spoken to him up until now. But Kirk says quite clearly, I am also a prisoner.
Yeah. They seem to accept this. And then the man helps Kirk break a bar on their cell window. Because he's a big lad.
Yeah. Kirk shouts to Spock, it's great news, they'll release him soon.
Yeah. But he has drastically misjudged the situation. And the comm batters him over the head with the bar.
No, the Yang batters him over the head.
Sorry, the Yang batters him over the head with the bar, yeah.
Yeah, and then we see him remove all the other bars, presumably to escape, as Spock says, are you okay?
Yeah, he wakes up in a groggy state 7 hours later.
Yeah.
That is severe. If it's been 7 hours, he has got a great deal of damage to the brain. That's a really severe concussion.
Must have been.
You can't be unconscious for 7 hours.
He must have slept it off. He said he was tired.
Still.
He sees keys on a table and again tells Spock, it's okay, I'll have you in a minute. What's that all about?
Yeah, I thought that was also quite lazy writing. Oh, there's a keys lying there. There's no ingenious...
It's not the only piece of lazy writing in this episode.
No, it's not. Anyway, yeah, he sees the keys. We'll have you out there in a minute. And we're back to the communications room, where as McCoy works away, the guard hears a scratching noise at the door, and when he opens it, he's pinched out by Spock.
He is. McCoy welcomes Kirk as Spock says he's going to fix up a makeshift communicating device.
Yeah, before McCoy goes on to reveal what he has discovered.
Did you find out anything?
Yes, I'm convinced that once there was a frightening biological war that existed here. The virus still exists. Then over the years, nature built up these natural immunizing agents in the food, the water, and the soil.
The war created an imbalance and nature counterbalanced.
There is a disease here, something that affected the Exeter landing party and us.
That's right. These immunizing agents take time, and that's the real tragedy. Had the Exeter landing party stayed here just a few hours longer, they never would have died.
Then we can leave any time we want to. Tracy's of the opinion that these immunizing agents can become a fountain of youth. There are people here over 1,000 years old, Bones.
Survival of the fittest, because their ancestors who survived had to have a superior resistance. Then they built up these powerful protective antibodies in the blood during the wars. Now, if you want to destroy a civilization or a whole world, perhaps your descendants might develop a longer life, but I hardly think it's worth it.
Then anything you develop here as a result of all this is useless.
Who knows? It might eventually cure the common cold, but lengthen lives? Poppycock. I can do more for you if you just eat right and exercise regularly.
Ready, Captain. Quite crude, voice communication will not be possible, but we can signal the ship.
All that bloodshed for nothing. It'll be sufficient, Mr. Spark.
Right. A few issues here.
A few? Okay.
First of all, I don't think that's how biological warfare works.
Probably not.
That you use weapons that turn folk to salt, and then nature counterbalances that by developing its own vaccine for the survivors.
Nah.
That's garbage.
Or else we could have nuclear bombs going off, and then, nature protects us with a cockroach shell.
Yeah, it's a pretty cheap solution as well to this disease. They've all got, oh yeah, no, you're fine now.
He's far too specific as well. If they stayed for a few hours, there's no way with his rudimentary lab that he has there that he could pinpoint how long they need to stay there to get immunisation that is effective. Just a few hours. Away you go.
Yeah. So anyway, that solves the problem. No one's left now with the disease that isn't also immunised.
Sorted.
The other part of it that I thought was ridiculous was this idea that they're only immunised against this specific biological effect, which presumably, I mean, that makes sense that there would be a lasting effect from biological warfare, but this whole thing, I'm glad you played it as a clip because I wouldn't have wanted to try and explain it.
No, that's why I played it as a clip. I thought, I'm not writing this.
It's utter garbage. The whole thing just ties itself in knots. But anyway, basically you're meant to not follow it, I think. Just accept the conclusion. Everyone's fine.
Okay.
And there's no way to make a serum. And don't ask any questions.
Anyway.
Tracy then shows up and phasers Spock in the face.
He does right to the face. So
what we don't know, and we're about to find out, is that he's been away fighting a battle with the comms.
Yeah, because he is quite bedraggled when you see him.
It's not explained in any way. You just have to kind of figure out from what he's saying. I think they've set this up.
Yeah. Also, he demands to know if Kirk set the Savage free to warn his tribes. He thinks he may have been in league with him.
Yeah, because they've sprung the ambush that Kirk knew about.
And he's now quite manic and talks of how the gangs came in wave after wave, even though they killed thousands of them, and he's obviously terrified of what's going on.
Yeah, they've lost, I think. At this point, McCoy has been looking after Spock and says he's fine, but he needs to get to sickbay.
Tracy, however, says this is impossible as they can't bring the disease up there with them, but they tell him that they are now immunised and can beam up anytime.
Tracy assumes that means they've found this serum that he was hoping for.
And this sends Kirk into a rage.
Yeah, he says there's no miracles, there's no serum, we've wasted our time, and you were wrong about everything.
Pretty much so, yeah. Tracy looks to McCoy for support, but is told by him to leave medicine to the medical men, and he shatters his belief by saying that he found no fountain of youth, no immortality. It's just natural for them to live longer where they are.
Yeah, they're not human.
Yeah.
So Tracy then orders Kirk out, and Kirk tells McCoy to keep an eye on Spock. And outside, Tracy then tells Kirk, and apparently this scene was removed when the show was in syndication, so folk had no idea what was going on. They thought Tracy was just taking Kirk out to shoot him.
Okay.
But anyway, Tracy explains to Kirk that everyone's dead or in hiding, and he needs to call the Enterprise and get more phasers before the Yangs come again.
Yeah, 10 more phasers with power packs.
Yeah. Kirk asks the Enterprise to do that, and Sulu says no.
Yeah, Sulu asks what the situation is, and with little option, he is told that the place isn't immediately dangerous.
Yep. Tracy's, I think, a bit irritated by this and says that the Enterprise crew are well trained. At this, he gets disarmed by Kirk and they have another fight, which again, Kirk, I think, loses, basically.
Yeah, well, he's eventually caught beside the chopping block. Tracy pulls the trigger. Now, was it set to stun here, do you think, or destroy?
I think it's set to kill him, but he's out of power.
Yep. So they both leap for the axe, and Tracy gets there first. He backs him up, but he gets too close, and Kirk is able to get on top of him, but at this he's jabbed in the back and turns to see a gang of spear-wielding Yangs standing over him.
Yes, they've come for the village.
We're now in Yang headquarters.
Yeah, and the guy that Kirk freed from the prison cell appears to be their leader. He's sitting in a big chair.
Well, he should be on their side then.
Well, maybe. There's statues around the walls and there's papers scattered on a table in front of them.
And outside you can hear a lot of whooping and a hollering. People celebrating their victory. Probably raping and pillaging as we speak.
That's it. And all the prisoners are here lined up, seated along a wall, including Kirk and McCoy and Tracy and Spock.
Yeah, Spock is weak and needs attention urgently, but their need to get out of there is greater.
That's exactly the same. Yeah. You're going to die, but also we're going to die.
We then have a piece of nonsense.
Yeah, well, I've written and they talk through their imagined version of history.
Yeah, okay, tell me about this, Ian.
So they imagine in a very racist conversation, which we will not repeat, that the Yangs are the Yankees and the Coms are communists. And that they fought the exact war that Earth avoided, and the Asiatics, can we even use that word?
Don't know. Probably not. It's probably best not to.
Okay. Beep it out then.
Okay.
One, if I don't know what I've said, the Yanks have simply fought to regain their land, and the white guys are the good guys.
Yeah. Spock, I mean, he states that the parallel is almost too close. Yeah, it is almost too close.
I don't think there's any almost about it.
Yeah.
McCoy calls Kirk a romantic when he's suggesting that these Yangs have simply regained the land that was stolen from them.
And at this point, a drummer enters, and the sound of the beat appears to suggest that the war has now been won.
Yes, he says that which is ours again. It will never be taken from us again.
And he's followed by who? Whom? What?
A guy with a flag.
Yeah, he's carrying the Stars and the Stripes.
It's literally an American flag.
Yeah, which they all rise for. Ugh, this is...
On the nose.
Yeah.
Absurd. Stupid.
Obnoxious.
Asinine.
Mm-hmm. Tracy whispers to Kirk that they should be able to handle them together and warns him not to cross him.
Yeah, he says he'll drag him down with him if he's left to flounder.
And then the big gang, he introduces himself.
Yeah, he's called Cloud William.
Stupid name.
You know, Cloud to you and me.
I just call him Williams.
I call him Cloud.
Okay.
He says he's the chief and also the son of the chief, which is a bit complicated unless he's related to his own mother in some strange way.
And he's a guardian of the holies and the leader of warriors. Yeah.
Speaker of holy words. He says this is the last com place. They've all been retaken. And then he goes over to the flag, puts his left hand on his heart and starts to speak gibberish. He says, I pledge you I need to flaggin tup kill for Stan.
Yeah.
Which is the Pledge of Allegiance, I believe, but garbled. Kirk recognises what he's saying and continues it in proper English to the great surprise of both Cloud William and the Elder. Yeah,
he's pulled in front of them and asked to explain before Tracy tries to use the situation to his advantage.
He spoke the holy word.
You know many of our high worship words. How?
In my land, we have a tribe like you.
Where is your tribe?
Up there. One of those points of light that you see at night.
Why are you here? Were you cast out?
You're confusing the stars with heaven.
He was cast out. Don't you recognize the evil one? Who else would trick you with your own sacred words? Let your God strike me dead if I lie. But he won't, because I speak for him.
Yet you killed many Yangs.
You tried to kill me.
We're not gods. We're not evil ones. We're men like yourselves.
Would a man know your holy words? Could a man use them to trick you? See his servant. His face, his eyes, his ears. Do the Yang legends describe the servant of the evil one?
Quite unfortunately for Kirk, they open this massive Bible at a page where there's a devil who looks like Spock.
Yeah, I've wrote here, in fairness, it's a very accurate depiction of Spock.
Well, McCoy said it before as well, or was it Kirk said who's the only person on board that looks like a devil?
Yeah. I had in the past, but he had to cover his ears. In fact, in real life, did we not have to? Was that not the thing that some sort of Bible belters weren't impressed with Star Trek because Spock looked too devilish?
Satan images. He had those traders with the blood in them.
Yeah. Kirk tries to explain this away, but Tracy keeps the pressure on by offering more evidence, by suggesting that he doesn't even have a heart.
Yes. McCoy immediately tries to explain that his heart's just in a different place, but the Elder checks and they find that he does not have a heart.
So they come to the conclusion that either one of Kirk or Tracy is lying and they must kill the evil one. But surely if they've listened to the heart and looked at that, they would believe Tracy.
Well, yeah, but they don't like him because he was shooting them with phasers. The problem, they've got a very sort of childlike interpretation of everything that's going on in front of them.
Yeah.
Much like many religions do. There's a good and there's an evil and that's it. So they come up with the solution that must work.
What's that?
They will have Kirk speak their holiest words, knowing that if he is indeed evil, his tongue would catch fire, so he would refuse to do it.
But there's a flaw in the plan.
He doesn't know these words.
Yeah.
They start off again with gibberish, id plebnista, norcon, forcon, perfect union. I think it's the start of the US Constitution.
Is it? Okay. But although Kirk thinks the words are familiar, he struggles, and so the manic Tracy says that Spock should be killed to encourage him. He's really getting quite...
A knife is put to Spock's throat at this point, and he looks a bit concerned.
And in a panic, Kirk pleads that there is a better way, and asks if their book doesn't promise good to be stronger than evil. And of course, I think the woman Yang must be quite taken with old Kirky boy, because she speaks up.
If she agrees, and they set up this fight between Kirk and Tracy, good versus evil, one hand tied to each other. I think their left hands are tied together, something like that.
A bit like arm wrestlers do.
Yes, and then we get McCoy giving the quote that we heard at the start of the episode about good needing to be very careful.
And they go mano a mano.
Spock now invents a new mental power for himself.
Yeah.
He persuades this woman through the power of suggestion, silent suggestion, to bring him his communicator.
How many times in the past would this have been useful?
Oh, lots of times.
He's never done it.
Never.
When there's guards, for example, we've seen plenty of times where they're locked in a cell somewhere.
Yeah, he's had to use mind powers through the walls and stuff like that.
But there's guards out there. He could have used this to say to the guard, open up the door.
What's quite funny is while he's concentrating trying to use this power, McCoy's like, what are you doing? What's going on?
In any case, Kirk seems to have overpowered his opposition and ends up holding the blade to his neck.
Yes, Cloud urges him to kill Tracy, but he cuts the strap between them and backs away as Sulu beams down with two guards.
Yeah, he tells Sulu that he'll explain what's going on later, but that Tracy has to be arrested and McCoy and Spock have to be set free.
Yes.
The now subservient Williams bows to Kirk and offers himself as his servant, but is told to rise and face him like an equal.
Yes. Kirk brings out these papers that are the US Constitution and explains to Cloud that it's not just for chiefs but for all the people, and he goes full shat.
He does, yeah. Tell me more about it.
He explains about we the people and the inherent greatness of the US and their mind or their worldview.
Yeah.
And he tells Cloud that he should include the comms, so this is the only progressive part of the entire episode, or the words mean nothing. Which I suppose is a fairly controversial thing to say back at the time when the Civil Rights Act was just passed and There's still a lot of tension. You've still got Japanese prisoner of war camps only 20 years ago.
Yeah, I'll give him that.
Anyhow, Cloud doesn't really understand, but he swears to obey the holy words, and Kirk leaves them to marvel at his wisdom.
That's not going to end well. If he doesn't understand what he's saying, that...
I think you can see from our own planet what goes wrong if you only look at the words in the Bible as your basis for organising and understanding
the words
things.
in the Bible, yes, or any other holy book, or even the American Constitution and the different amendments where people will twist it and turn it to decide that it means what they want them to mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Interpretation is everything.
You get these people who are hell-bent on some of the worst ideas in the world, and they call themselves constitutionalists.
Yeah.
Because they can interpret words whatever way they want to.
Indeed.
Anyhow, Spock now takes Kirk aside and says that, we've breached the Prime Directive too, Kirky boy. And he says, nah, look, it's fine. Freedom, yo. Let's leave them to learn about liberty. So he glances at the flag and does a sort of silent salute to himself.
Yeah. the well-known Canadian actor.
Yes. And that's them off for another adventure. And
yes, that ending was all about USA, wasn't it?
Yeah, Team America stuff.
Yeah. I'm
sure
maybe in the 60s it was more acceptable.
Was it?
I don't know. Yeah. Well, even today it is, isn't it? Depends who you are, where you are.
If you did this now, the Yanks would all have like AK-15s or whatever they are.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, Proud Boys.
AR-15, I think, is the actual
AK?
thing. Nah, I think it's AR.
You talking about the guns?
Yeah.
That's AK. Assault rifles?
Yeah.
I think it's AK.
Is it not AR for assault rifle? AK-47s.
I thought it was a Kalashnikov, somebody named after the Kalashnikov.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, big guns.
I know nothing about it because they're stupid and people shouldn't have them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Also, at a time in real life when, you're seeing a massive rise in hate crimes against Asians.
Yes.
Should this episode be banned?
No, we won't go that far. But it's... we're doing our bit. That's the whole point. We're looking back, and again, the raison d'etre of this podcast, and most of the ones that we've done in the past, whether it be Columbo or whatever, Fawlty Towers, is to look at how they stand up after a period of decades have passed. So
I think the problem with this one is that there's a lot of people who think it does stand up. People who think that the American way is the only right way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully none of them are listening to this show.
No. Again, we're not having a go at the Americans per se. The Brits and the British have had more than their fair share of this sort of nonsense.
Absolutely. Imperialist garbage.
Over the years.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. We're having a go at all sorts of imperialism. It just happens to be that America at the moment are one of the major superpowers, and the Brits have had their backside spanked.
I think neither the US Constitution nor anything that we have here is anywhere close to being a manual for a free and fair civilization.
Not at all, no. But again, it's only as good as the people who are in power to enforce it.
Yeah. Well, you say with any system. You say, communism was evil because it had evil people running it.
Exactly.
Anyhow, going back to the in-universe story, it's quite interesting to compare Tracy with Decker from the Doomsday Machine.
I thought you were going to say Decker from the A-Team.
No.
Colonel Decker. No.
They both lost their entire crew, slightly different circumstances, but their reactions were very different.
Remind me.
Well, Decker lost his whole crew to the big sort of cigar thing.
Yes.
And he went on a mission to destroy it to get his own back, whereas Tracy went very much the other way and thought, how can I benefit from this? Have you got any other thoughts on the episode?
Nah, it wasn't one you could really buy into.
No. It was kind of jarring, I think is the word we've used in the past. It knocks you out of the enjoyment of the episode when you get things like this. Like, why would there be an American Constitution and an American flag on a planet the other end of the galaxy anyway?
Because they get everywhere.
There's no indication of it having been brought previously, and why are they fighting a biological war that is exactly the same as the 1960s Earth? Oh, come on.
I know. Beyond
credulity.
Mm-hmm. So one that hasn't effectively, it didn't stand the test of time very well. It hasn't stood up.
Yeah, let's just forget about it.
Yeah, I think so.
Originally aired on the 1st of March 1968, which I think makes it another schedule change because that's only 6 days after the previous episode. Maybe it was a special occasion. Directed by Vincent Mccready, 5th of his 6. We've talked about him more on the podcast for Miri, which we talked about during this episode.
And the Columbo podcast.
Yeah, quite a lot. He did a lot of Columbos after this. The only person getting the blame for the writing of this is Gene Roddenberry. Took full writing credit. He'd been trying to push this episode from the very beginning, and he'd been told no by his colleagues, he'd been told no by the studio. I think Robert Justman, the producer, produced a scathing memo explaining why you shouldn't do any of the things in this episode, but then didn't have the nerve, that might not be the right or it might not be fair, but he only spoke to him about it rather than putting it down in writing.
Yeah, and also he wouldn't have had the authority.
Well, that's that. You don't want to push too many buttons with the main man. The studio rejected it multiple times, and he pushed it and ended up with this pile of garbage.
Was it based on the same sort of issues that we've discussed, or was it just because he thought it was...
I just think, there's a lot of issues with it. Regardless, there's no explanation for where these folk come from. You don't deal with the issues that are raised in the episode.
Yes, it wasn't sort of political issues. They weren't...
And possibly that as well. Maybe they thought it's a bit of a tinderbox, but they got away with using it in the end, so maybe that was allowed.
Okay.
Morgan Woodward, you would have recognised playing Captain Tracy, second of his 2 Star Trek appearances. He was even more bedraggled than the first one.
Yeah, when he reminded me of Kramer from Seinfeld.
Yeah, we talked about him more in the podcast for Dagger of the Mind, so you can go back and listen to that from season 1 if you're interested. Roy Jensen played Cloud William. This was his only Star Trek appearance. He was a professional football player in Canada, not soccer, the Canadian football, before he became an actor, and he appeared in shows like Mission Impossible, Bonanza and The A-Team, as well as films like Chinatown and Dillinger. He died in 2007 when he was 80.
Chinatown is brilliant.
Okay. Lloyd Kino played Wu. This was his only Star Trek appearance, but he also showed up in series like Happy Days and T.J. Hooker, as well as films like Godzilla and Mortal Kombat, and died in 2012 when he was 93. So nowhere near 400.
No.
Disappointing. Irene Kelly played Sarah, which was the female Yang in The Cell. Her only Star Trek appearance, but she also showed up in series like Mission Impossible and Quincy M.E. David L. Ross played Lieutenant Galloway, and this was his 7th of 9 appearances in the role.
Have you not mentioned him before? No?
Yeah, we mentioned him. We've not actually mentioned him in trivia. We mentioned him earlier today when he died in the episode. The fact he's going to come back 2 more times.
Okay.
He also appeared in shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Macmillan and Wife, as well as having a role in Rocky 2. And he's now 81 years old.
No Columbo connection this week?
Well, no.
Oh,
bear
sorry,
with me.
Sorry.
Morgan Farley was the Yang Elder, second of his 2 Star Trek roles. Hear more about him if you go back to the podcast for Return of the Archons. Ed Mccready played Dr. Carter. So you saw him at the start. He gave the log,
yes,
saying everyone's dead. I mentioned him in passing when we talked about Dagger of the Mind when I did that podcast, but I didn't really get into his CV. This was the 4th of his 5 Star Trek episodes, and he also appeared in shows like Bewitched, Batman and Mission Impossible, as well as the movie Dick Tracy, along with 6 Columbos.
6?
Yeah, he played roles as varied as Man in Bar, Detective Number 2, Plainclothesman, that was all one word, and Ed,
right,
making him this week's connection. He died in 2002 at the age of 72. Do you recognise the episodes from those characters?
Nope.
Okay. Gene Roddenberry was so happy with his own work on this episode that he personally submitted it for Emmy consideration. Did not win the Emmy.
Good.
This is the only episode with any reference to phasers having or needing power packs.
Is it?
The speech of Cloud William was artificially slowed, so he sounded duller. In the closing credits for this episode when it first ran, a message was shown confirming that the show was renewed for a 3rd season and imploring viewers to stop sending letters. No Scotty or Chekhov this week, so quite a cheap one, I would imagine. Lieutenant Leslie did show up towards the end, even though he was killed in Obsession. Again, there's a story that there was a scene where he was saved that just didn't get filmed. It was in the script.
Fair enough.
In terms of international titles making a return, it wasn't in last week's episode. In France, this was Nous le Peuple, We the People. In German, it was Das Jahr des Roten Vögel, Year of the Redbirds. And in Japan, they went with Seiken Senso no Hate, the result of the bacteriological war.
Yeah.
Next week, 24th episode of Season 2, The Ultimate Computer, which features experimental new technology. And in the meantime, find us on social media. We're at Trek Podcast on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. You'll find us on YouTube if you want to see the episodes there, or go to AskStarTrekPodcast.com where there's a post up for every show and you can leave your thoughts, reminiscences and complaints for the editor.
Until next time,
cheerio.
Bye-bye.